What's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today we're going to be talking about long leg friendly quad building exercises. So if you're like myself and you have long femurs, you likely understand that it can be pretty tough to build quality quad mass. And so in the context of hypertrophy and really doubling down on creating high levels of mechanical tension in the quads, we have to be a little bit more strategic with our exercise selection. So I wanted to put together a video and talk about some of my favorite exercises that I have currently implemented into my training block that I have been loving, and then hopefully you can play with and experiment with. These are not an end-all be-all list, so please don't take it as these are the only exercises you can use to build your quads if you have long legs. These are just some of my favorites that I've been implementing, and I wanted to provide a little bit of rationale as to why. But that being said, let's dive into the exercises. So the first exercise is a quad biased walking lunge, and this exercise is phenomenal for two key reasons. Number one, there are countless ways to create progressive overload with this exercise. You can use volume, load, tempo, you can do pauses. There are just so many ways that you can actually get benefit out of this exercise that it's like so dynamic. The second reason is that you can load it in countless ways. You can use bilateral dumbbells, ipsilateral, contralateral. You can do a front rack hold with a barbell, with kettlebells, with a safety squat bar. You can use a traditional rack position. There are endless ways to load it too, which also makes it phenomenal when it comes to the progressive overload standpoint and how you're trying to benefit from this exercise. Now, when it comes to performing this exercise, a couple of coaching points to keep in mind is number one, when we are stepping forward with that front leg, I want you to take a shorter stride than what you're used to with your traditional walking lunge, and then I want you to focus on driving that front leg's knee forward over the toes, pretty much as far as you can and as far as your body will allow. We want to create as much stretch in that front leg's quad as possible. With the back leg, so as we're doing this with the front, I want you to focus on kicking down into the ground, so pushing into the ground with that back leg and then using it to help push you forward. We do this for two key reasons. Number one is we're going to be focusing on creating a nice lengthened position of that back leg's quad, so it's going to be nice and active. And then number two, as mentioned before, we can actually use that tension and that pushing into the ground to help push us further with that front leg. So we're getting this nice dual benefit with both legs for the quads. Now, as you're standing up, I want you to focus on pushing through the balls of the feet in your front leg and bringing those legs together before your next step. If you do this, you should be getting a pretty sick leg pump. And again, there are so many ways to execute this exercise. There really is a variation for everyone. The second exercise is an ipsilateral rear foot elevated split squat with a support. In layman's terms, this means that we are going to be holding one kettlebell or dumbbell on the same side that we're performing the split squat on, and then we're going to be holding like a dowel, a broom rod, or a rack for whatever for support. The reason I love this variation is because if we set up correctly, we can get a ton of quad benefit, and with that level of support here, we can really focus on our positioning and how we're physically loading our split squat. I think a lot of times balance can be a limiting factor in the context of rear foot elevated split squat specifically. So by adding this level of support, we take that out of the equation and we could focus on more meaningful exercise reps. Now, a couple of coaching points with this variation is number one, I would suggest using a weightlifting shoe, a wedge, or putting your heel up onto a plate. This is going to allow you to drive that knee more forward. And then also, like in our walking lunge variation, bring your stance in a little bit. This is going to allow you to stay more over that front leg and really drive that knee forward. With the back leg, you're going to think about keeping it somewhat active, so keeping some tension on the bench behind you or whatever you have set your back leg on. This is going to once again get a nice benefit from the stretched or lengthened position of that back-legged quad and focus on opening up that hip, and this will help allow you to really push that front knee forward. When you're coming back up into your positioning, I want you to focus on driving down into the ground and really focusing on what the quad is doing to help facilitate knee extension. So the next two exercises I've been performing as a superset later on in my training session, and it has been an absolute killer. Like, can you put these exercises earlier on? Yes. Can you do them individually? Absolutely. But if you want to try a fun superset for your quads, give this one a go. So the two exercises we're going to be performing is a quad bias leg press and a supported sissy squat. So I have two different rationales as to why I like these together. For the quad bias leg press, we're going to get a nice lengthened stimulus with our quads, and we could focus on loading those a little bit heavier. We have a machine acting as a constraint in regard to how we are going to be progressing and how we're going to be stabilizing the body to get a nice quad benefit. Now, with this variation, we're going to focus on bringing our feet down a little bit on the platform, and if you don't have a good platform that has a nice like wedge naturally built into it, you can use an external wedge, a weightlifting shoe, and that should help you get into better positioning in regard to dorsiflexion and allowing those knees to track further over the toes when you are bringing the weight down and doing your leg press. Now, after your leg press, you're gonna go into a supported sissy squat. So we're gonna hold on to like a rack or anything that's pretty much stable. And I want you to focus on, when you hold onto this object, keeping your feet relatively in line with it. You're gonna focus on coming up on the toes and then driving those knees forward while maintaining a relatively upright torso position. This is going to allow you to maintain better positioning in regard to how you're driving those knees forward and how you're displacing your load over the quads. So pair these two together. It is a killer combo. I would suggest doing the leg press for like anywhere from like 8 to 12 reps and then working a little bit heavier. And then for the sissy squat, doing like for 15 and 20 reps because it is gonna be an absolute burner and killer, and it's gonna help you focus on really how to lengthen those quads to get a nice burn and stimulus. The final two exercises I've also been performing as a superset. Can you perform them individually? Yes, but as a superset, I've been loving them for a couple of different reasons. And the two exercises include a leg extension paired with an isometric split squat. And so I'll use them in two different contexts specifically for my training goals. I'll either use them towards the end of my session to accrue a little bit of additional quad volume and to focus on my hips and what they are doing. And then I'll use them at the beginning of my session when I have a big leg day planned and my knees are giving me a little bit of issues. I have knees that are constantly acting up. So by adding in some isometrics and some direct quad work earlier on in my session, it actually can help me a ton get through that session with relatively low discomfort, etc. And so with this pairing, I think the big thing is to focus on, with the leg extension, not worrying so much about your load, but instead worrying more about the tempo and what you're doing during that contracted or extended position. This will give you a better opportunity to train the quad in a shortened and contracted position. And then with that isometric split squat, the big thing is, number one, focusing on what your pelvis is doing. So trying to keep that pelvis a little bit more neutral. And then with that back leg, similar to our walking lunge variation, focus on driving down into the implement behind you. This is a great way to also just open up the hip after a long session of a lot of hip flexion. So it can also be a dynamic tool for both knee health and also worrying about your hip mobility in regard to being able to keep it nice and open and loaded while it's in an open position. This pairing can be phenomenal, and I would highly suggest staying a little bit lighter in regard to load and using them more as tools to accrue a little bit of additional volume and do some tune-up work pre or post workout. All right guys, that wraps up this video on long leg friendly exercises. So if you have long femurs and you're trying to build your quads, give these exercises a go, give these supersets a go, and let me know how you like them. Again, these are not like an end all be all. There are a ton of different ways to approach building the quads, and these are just 6 of the exercises that I've really been digging and I've been plugging into my training blocks accordingly. If you give these a go and like them, let me know in the comments, or if you have additional questions, hit me in the comments below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next one.